Kendrick? Don't worry about him. He'll die poor. Just some salaried doctor with no real property to his name.
Kendrick, I've been unhappy for a long time. I think the most mature path forward.
The door opened. A woman in a charcoal blazer walked in without knocking.
Mr. Cross's legal counsel, please continue. This is a family dinner. It presents as a legal proceeding.
62 transactions, 16 months, $52,000. Disguised as HOA fees, contractors, storage. Every cent routed to the man now sitting beside Melody, holding a champagne flute he suddenly didn't know what to do with. Darius Reed stood, buttoned his jacket, walked out without a word. Then Evelyn pressed a hand to her chest.
My heart, the stress, I think I'm not well.
Your heart is fine, Evelyn. I reviewed these myself.
The room stopped breathing, and then Melody's face collapsed. Everything she'd rehearsed, gone.
Kendrick, I'm so sorry, please.
I once wanted to believe in us. But you chose this road 14 months ago.
He stood, picked up the folder, walked to the door. But what no one in that room knew, what even Kendrick hadn't discovered yet, was that this wasn't the end of the story. It was only the beginning of what patience can truly build. Kendrick Cross was 40 years old, and he believed in one thing above everything else: patience. Not the passive kind, the kind his grandmother Cora demonstrated on Saturday mornings in her kitchen off Campbellton Road, hands moving slow and deliberate over the counter, flour on her forearms, the smell of something becoming good long before it went into the oven. "Patient hands make a perfect dish, baby," she'd say without looking up. He had carried those words through medical school at Emory, through his residency, through the years of building Cross Cardiology Group into 4 clinics across Atlanta, through 6 years of marriage to a woman he genuinely loved. He was still carrying them the night his cousin Marcus called. Marcus Cross was Kendrick's first cousin, the closest thing to a brother he'd ever had. Over the years, he had attended a handful of Tate family gatherings, friendly, unobtrusive, easy to forget in a crowd. Which was precisely what happened the evening Evelyn Tate forgot he was sitting at the far end of her dinner table. Marcus pressed record on instinct, then sat with that recording for nearly 3 weeks, replaying it, telling himself each morning he'd call Kendrick, each morning putting the phone back in his pocket. Because there's something about delivering news that can't be unheard that makes even the most loyal person hesitate. Finally, on a Monday evening in October, he called. "Cuz, I need you to hear something, and I'm sorry it took me this long." Kendrick sat at the kitchen table on Cascade Road, the same one he and Melody had picked out at a furniture store on Ponce de Leon Avenue, back when that still felt like building something, and pressed play. Outside, October rain tapped softly at the window. A streetlight threw a pale stripe across the kitchen floor. Somewhere down the block, a dog barked twice and went quiet. And through the phone speaker, Evelyn Tate's voice filled the room. "Kendrick? Don't worry about him. He'll die poor. Just some salaried doctor with no real property to his name. You deserve much better, Melody. You always have." He pressed pause, set the phone down, looked at it, then pressed play again and listened to every word. All 4 minutes and 37 seconds. There is a particular kind of pain that doesn't arrive with noise. No slammed doors, no broken dishes. It arrives quietly, almost politely, and settles in the chest, just left of center, where a cardiologist knows better than anyone that the most important muscle in the body lives. Kendrick felt it land there. He clenched his fist once on the kitchen table, then opened it again. He looked at the wedding photo on the refrigerator. Melody and Ivory laughing, him beside her, looking at her the way a man looks when he believes he is exactly where he should be. Cora in the front row in her lavender dress, pressing a handkerchief to the corner of her eye. He remembered what Cora told him the morning of that wedding. Be patient with her, Kendrick. A good marriage is a long recipe. He turned the recording off, and as he sat there in the quiet kitchen, rain still at the window, the streetlight still painting its stripe across the floor, one question formed in his mind. Slow. Precise. How much of this had they already prepared? And how long ago did it begin? He didn't sleep that night. But he wasn't panicking. He was thinking. Because what Evelyn Tate didn't know, what none of them knew, was that a patient man had just started paying very close attention. Stay with me, because what Kendrick finds in the days ahead isn't just a betrayal. It's a blueprint. 62 transactions, 16 months, and a text message that will make you question everything about this marriage. The Monday after Marcus's call, Kendrick arrived at the clinic at 5:28 a.m. He made his coffee, set his patient files in order, and then did something he had never done at work before. He opened his personal financial accounts on his laptop and began to read. The account in question was his private operating account, separate from the joint household account he and Melody shared for bills, separate from the clinic's corporate holdings. It was connected to the household banking app for tax transparency. Melody could see it. She was not authorized to move money from it. He read the statements the way he read an EKG strip, looking for the beat that doesn't belong. He found it in month 1. A transfer of $4,000, outbound, to an account he didn't recognize. Memo field, property management. There was no property to manage. He kept reading. 62 transactions over 16 months, small enough to avoid automatic alerts. The largest just under $8,000, the smallest $240. Each one with a different memo. HOA dues, contractor, storage, insurance, different labels, same destination, same unauthorized account. When he added them together, the number sat on the screen with the weight of something that has been true for a long time and is only now being looked at. $52,400. He wrote it on a notepad, circled it once, and set it beside his coffee. She hadn't simply spent money he didn't know about. She had engineered 62 individual transactions, each disguised as a routine household expense, using the viewing access he had given her freely and in good faith as the mechanism for the fraud. He didn't slam the laptop shut. He didn't reach for his phone. He pulled up Victoria Osei's number. From the outside, Kendrick's stillness in that moment deserves a closer look. Because most people, the second they discover financial betrayal, do precisely the wrong thing. They confront. They demand explanations before they have the full picture. And in doing so, they hand the other person exactly what they need. Time to delete evidence and shift the narrative back in their favor. Psychologists call the alternative emotional deactivation under stress. The deliberate choice to set your immediate reaction aside so your analytical mind can do the work that actually matters. Not numbness, not denial. Intelligence before pain. Kendrick Cross had been practicing it in operating rooms since he was 32. In the days ahead, it would save him everything. 2 days later, he found the message. An old shared tablet in the bedside drawer, the one they'd used for travel bookings, untouched since a trip to Savannah 18 months prior. A message thread synced from Melody's phone, dated 14 months ago. Recipient, D. His prenup is airtight on the clinic ownership, but his personal account is connected to the household app. I've been watching it for 3 months. I think there's a path. He read it once, set the tablet down, read it again. Not because he didn't understand it, because the part of him that had meant every word of his wedding vows needed to stand inside that sentence for a moment before moving on. 14 months ago. 3 months after she had already been watching. 3 months after she had chosen a direction and was simply refining the method. During that entire period, he had been coming home from 12-hour shifts, turning off the lights, telling himself the distance between them was the ordinary kind, the kind long marriages accumulate and long marriages repair. He set the tablet on the dresser and went to find out who Dee was. Here is something important to understand about Melody's behavior, not to excuse it, but to explain the architecture beneath it. The trail of this kind, financially organized, carried out over more than a year, almost never originates from pure cruelty. It almost always originates from a distorted value system reinforced over years by a dominant attachment figure. In Melody's case, that figure was Evelyn. When a parent consistently defines love as a transaction, you deserve better, he doesn't have enough, they are quietly rewriting their child's emotional blueprint, teaching that person to evaluate a partner through scarcity and comparison rather than loyalty and character. Melody didn't set out to destroy a good man. She acted out a script placed in her hands over years, and she never stopped long enough to ask who wrote it or why. That is not an excuse, but it is the truth. Kendrick called Victoria Osei that afternoon. Victoria worked out of a building on West Peachtree Street and treated words the way a surgeon treats incisions. Precise, never more than necessary. When Kendrick finished, she was quiet for 4 seconds. Forward me everything tonight. Every statement, every transaction, the prenup, the account documentation showing Melody's access level. Already pulling it. Do not change your behavior. Do not move money. Do not say a word to her. Understood. A pause. You're remarkably calm for a man who just found out his wife has been routing funds to someone named Darius for over a year. I'm a cardiologist, Kendrick said. I don't panic during the procedure. 4 days later, Victoria called back with something that landed harder than anything he'd found himself. Evelyn Tate had contacted a family law firm on Piedmont Road 16 months earlier with what she called a hypothetical question. Could a spouse claim partial ownership of separately held medical practice entities during a divorce? She named the clinic Cross Cardiology Group, by name. She never retained the firm, so no privilege attached. The attorney was a professional contact of Victoria's who flagged it because the inquiry was too specific to be general curiosity. She was asking about your clinics by name, Victoria said, 16 months ago. 3 months before the first unauthorized transfer. 2 months before Melody texted Darius. The architecture became suddenly completely visible. Evelyn had moved first, assessed the legal terrain, identified the obstacles, handed the strategy to Melody. Melody had found Darius. Then the transfers began. This hadn't started with a wife falling out of love. It had started with a mother deciding her son-in-law's assets were worth pursuing, and working methodically backward from there. What Evelyn did, framing a targeted legal inquiry as a casual hypothetical, is what behavioral psychologists call plausible deniability maneuvering. Gather intelligence, leave no formal record. If challenged, I was just asking a general question. But timing is the most honest witness in any story. 7 months before any divorce was filed, Evelyn Tate was consulting attorneys about her son-in-law's specific business holdings. This was not a worried mother. This was a campaign. And it reveals the most uncomfortable truth in this story. Sometimes the force most actively dismantling your marriage is not the person inside it. Sometimes it stands just outside, at the head of a dinner table, holding a champagne flute, smiling warmly. Kendrick had looked in that direction, and what he saw changed everything. The following week, Sylvia appeared in his office doorway with the careful expression she reserved for things she'd been sitting on too long. She set her laptop on his desk and turned it toward him. The clinic's online booking system. A patient profile created 11 weeks earlier. Name, Angela Morris. Gmail created the same day. One appointment requested, never confirmed, during a slot when Kendrick was scheduled. Then dormant. Our IT consultant flagged it during a security audit, Sylvia said. The IP address traces to your home network, your residential address on Cascade Road. She pulled up the activity log. Same IP accessed the portal 4 times over 6 weeks. Each time it looked only at your schedule. Last access was 9 weeks ago. After Sylvia left, Kendrick sat quietly. Melody hadn't been tracking his schedule out of jealousy. She had been mapping it, identifying his patterns, confirming when he'd be away, when windows would open. While he'd been coming home and assuming the distance between them was the ordinary kind, she had studied him like an opponent. He opened a clean page on his notepad, wrote one word at the top. Everything. He would know the complete picture before he moved a single step. Through careful channels in the days that followed, Kendrick identified D. Darius Reed. Broad-shouldered, polished, a man in serious financial collapse. Company under federal investigation, personal accounts under mounting pressure. Not a man of means pursuing someone else's wife. A man in freefall who urgently needed someone to catch him. Kendrick wrote it in his neat handwriting, locked the notepad in the desk drawer, and went back to his patient files. Patient hands make a perfect dish. If you found out your spouse had been secretly routing money to someone else for over a year, would you confront them immediately or do what Kendrick did and wait? Comment 1 if you'd confront. Comment 2 if you'd wait. Because what Kendrick does next, walking into that Buckhead restaurant with a folder and an attorney, is something most people would never have the nerve to pull off. And it's coming up right now. The invitation came on a Tuesday. A text from Melody, phrased with a brightness one careful shade too deliberate to be genuine. There's a family dinner Saturday at Aria in Buckhead. Mom really wants everyone together. Please come. It's important. Aria, on West Paces Ferry Road. White tablecloths, private dining rooms. The kind of restaurant where people go to mark the formal conclusion of things. He replied with 4 words. I'll be there. Then he called Victoria Osei. Saturday came golden and crisp the way October Saturdays do in Atlanta. Kendrick parked his own car, the same 2019 Volvo he'd driven for 5 years, the one Evelyn had apparently pointed out to relatives as evidence of his limited ambition, and walked to the entrance of Aria at exactly 6:47 p.m. Dark minimalist suit, no tie, a single thin folder under his left arm. Inside, the private dining room had been arranged with intention. Long table, champagne already poured, 8 people seated. Evelyn at the head, filling the room with the density of her certainty. Melody to her right in a red dress, hands folded too tightly, eyes fixed somewhere between the breadbasket and the centerpiece. And beside Melody, leaning back with the practiced ease of a man who has never seriously doubted himself, despite having every reason to, Darius Reed. Broad-shouldered, polished, already holding a champagne flute. The seating had been arranged so that when Kendrick sat, he was flanked on both sides by Evelyn's relatives, facing Darius across white linen. A man on trial. Kendrick sat down and accepted a glass of water. For 12 minutes, the table held the performance. Church auxiliary, a cousin's son's football season at Westlake High School. The weather. A fork touched a plate. Kendrick listened, drank his water, and waited. Then Evelyn set her champagne flute down with a small, deliberate click. I think we all know why we're really here. Melody cleared her throat. When she spoke, the cadence was the cadence of sentences rehearsed many times that still don't feel natural. Kendrick, I've been unhappy for a long time. I think we both know the marriage hasn't been working. I've consulted an attorney, and I think the most mature path forward. The door of the private dining room opened. Victoria Osei walked in. Charcoal blazer, briefcase. The stride of a woman who has never needed to announce herself because her presence does it for her.
She set the briefcase at the corner of the table and opened it without asking permission.
Mr. Cross's legal counsel, please continue.
Evelyn's composure fractured at the edges, then reassembled.
This is a family dinner.
It presents as a legal proceeding, Victoria said pleasantly. So I'd like to contribute. What happened over the next 11 minutes was something several people in that room would quietly revisit for years. Victoria placed documents across the white tablecloth with the efficiency of someone who expects it to go exactly as planned. First, the complete corporate filing history of Cross Cardiology Group. 4 clinic locations, all registered under a family trust established 3 years before the wedding. Public record, irrefutable. Second, the prenuptial agreement. 7 pages, both signatures on page 7, notarized, witnessed. Melody's name in her own handwriting. Third, a forensic financial summary prepared by a certified fraud examiner. 62 transactions, 16 months, $52,400, originating from an account for which Melody held viewing access only, with no transfer authorization on record. Each transaction listed with its fabricated memo field. Property management, HOA dues, contractor, storage, insurance. Victoria placed the third set in front of Melody. This is not a legal proceeding, she said. Think of it as a professional courtesy, so that everyone at this table understands the actual landscape before any decisions are made. The champagne glasses were still full. Nobody was touching them. Evelyn looked at the prenup. Read the tab section covering separately held business entities. Set it face down on the tablecloth. At the far end of the table, one of Evelyn's family friends had been quietly checking her phone. She looked up, at Darius specifically, with an expression trying hard to be neutral and not quite managing. She leaned over and whispered something. The information moved around the table the way bad news travels when everyone can already feel it coming. Darius Reed's company had filed emergency suspension paperwork that afternoon. The federal investigation was public. His primary account was frozen. Darius set his champagne flute down slowly. His jaw worked for a moment. Then he seemed to arrive at a decision about how this evening would end for him. He stood, buttoned his jacket with deliberate calm. I think, he said, in a voice aimed at dismissive and landing just short of it, I'm going to let you all sort out your family business. He looked at Kendrick for exactly 1 second, a look that wanted to be a warning and arrived as a retreat, then walked to the door with his shoulders held deliberately square. Nobody spoke until the door fully closed. It was Evelyn who broke the silence. She pressed one hand to her chest. Her voice went thin. My heart, the stress. I think I'm not well. Her eyes found Kendrick. He was already reaching into the folder. He set a single page on the table in front of her. Her most recent cardiac evaluation from Emory University Hospital, completed 8 weeks prior. Normal sinus rhythm. No acute findings. Cleared for all general activity. Your heart is fine, Evelyn, he said quietly. I reviewed these myself. The room did not move. Melody's composure gave way. Her shoulders dropped first. Then her whole face followed, crumpling the way a face does when the story a person has been telling themselves collapses under its own weight. She pressed both hands over her mouth. Kendrick. Barely a sound. I'm sorry. I was so wrong. Please. He looked at her. For exactly 2 seconds, something moved through his chest. Not anger, not bitterness, but something older and softer than either. He remembered the early years, the small apartment near Emory, the way she used to bring him coffee at midnight during his residency. No words, just coffee and her hand resting on his shoulder. He had loved her. That had been real. He let the 2 seconds pass. I once wanted to believe in us, he said, but you chose this road 14 months ago. A pause. I no longer want to believe. He stood, buttoned his jacket, picked up the folder. Victoria was already closing the briefcase. That 2-second pause is the most important moment in this entire scene. Not the documents, not the frozen accounts, not Darius and his borrowed composure. Because what Kendrick demonstrated there was something rare. He acknowledged the love without letting it override the truth. He held both things at once. The love that had been real and the betrayal that had also been real, and chose not to let one cancel the other. Many people never find that distinction. They either deny the love ever existed, which turns grief into bitterness, or they let the love override the evidence, which turns loyalty into a trap. Kendrick did neither. He honored both. And then he walked out. Outside on West Paces Ferry Road, the October air was clean against his face. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. Don't you dare give that girl any money. You think you won tonight. I'm watching you. Darius. The same posture as the door, a retreat dressed up as a threat. Kendrick forwarded it to Victoria with one word. Received. Then he put the phone in his pocket and walked to his car. The question that sat with him the whole drive home wasn't whether Darius would follow through. Men who send threatening texts from unknown numbers at 11 o'clock at night have already decided they're powerless. The threat is the last thing they have. The question was simpler. What had Melody actually believed about this man? What had she seen in him that she'd stopped seeing in me? He didn't have the answer. He suspected, after a while, that he might not need one. Kendrick walked out of that restaurant with everything intact. His assets, his dignity, his future. But 8 months from now, the person who walks through his clinic door on Peachtree Road won't be Darius. Stay with me, because this next part is the one that will stay with you longest. Kendrick filed for divorce 14 days after the dinner at Aria. Under Georgia law, a no-fault divorce with a valid prenuptial agreement and no minor children is among the queener proceedings a family court sees. Melody's attorney, who almost certainly advised her, after reviewing the prenup, that contesting it would be expensive and futile, filed a response that was, in legal terms, essentially a concession, formatted differently. The divorce was finalized 87 days after filing. No courtroom drama. No tearful testimony, just paperwork, moving through a system with no feelings about any of it, arriving at a conclusion that had been inevitable since the moment Victoria first opened her briefcase on a white tablecloth in Buckhead. Darius Reed's threatening text, forwarded to Victoria that same night, became part of a formal documentation file. When Victoria's office sent a single letter to Darius's attorney, noting the text, the federal investigation, and the forensic financial summary under review for possible referral to the Fulton County District Attorney, Darius went very quiet. Men like Darius tend to be loudest just before they have nothing left to say. Melody moved back to her mother's house in Cascade Heights, and Kendrick went back to work. He was at the clinic by 5:30 every morning, same as always. Patient files, rounds at Piedmont Hospital on Thursdays, and the quiet work of establishing a new nonprofit in Cascade Heights, something he'd been planning for 2 years and now had the clarity to build. He named it the Cora Hart Center. He chose the location himself, a building in the neighborhood where his grandmother had taught him to be patient with his life. He financed it through the trust. He didn't announce it, he simply began the work. 7 months in, his bookkeeper flagged something in the donor records. An anonymous contribution had been routed through a charitable trust to the pediatric cardiac screening program. The amount was significant. The identity was masked. The date was April. He noted it, set it aside. There would be time. The following week, Sylvia knocked on his office door. She had her reading glasses pushed up on her head the way she always did when she was choosing her words. "Dr. Cross, there's a new patient in the waiting room, referred from Emory, cardiology. Abnormal EKG findings over 4 months. Elevated troponin in her last labs." She paused. "She's been referred to us twice before. She canceled both times." "How far apart?" 6 weeks, then 4. Dr. Patterson at Emory sent a personal note with this referral. He told her directly that the progression meant she was out of time. Kendrick held out his hand. Sylvia gave him the intake form. He looked at the name. He understood immediately why she had canceled twice. She had seen Cross Cardiology Group on the referral slip, and she had canceled. Not because she was careless with her health, but because walking through that door required something she hadn't yet been ready to give. She had delayed as long as a physician's direct warning would allow. Then she had driven herself to Peachtree Road and walked in without calling ahead, because calling ahead would have given her one more chance to turn back. "Give me 5 minutes," he said. He stood in the hallway outside the waiting room. He read her chart the way he read every chart. The clinical picture was clear, a heart under sustained stress, the kind that builds over time. He was a doctor. A person was unwell. That was the beginning and end of the professional question. He picked up the file and walked to the door. "Dr. Cross," Sylvia said from the desk, "your next patient is ready." Evelyn Tate was seated near the window, gray blouse, reading glasses pushed up on her head. Purse held in both hands, pressed against her lap, the way people hold something when they need something solid to hold on to. She was looking at the floor when the door opened. She looked up when she heard his footsteps. Every bit of color left her face. He watched the recognition move through her. The moment she understood exactly where she was, and who was standing in front of her, and what that meant. He had seen that expression in the consultation room before. It was the face of a person who suddenly understands the full weight of something they had hoped to manage differently. He walked toward her at the same pace he always walked. "Mrs. Tate, I'm Dr. Cross. Come on back." The examination room was quiet. Exam table, monitor, 2 chairs. A framed photograph near the window. The Atlanta skyline at dawn, caught from the Buckhead Ridge, the city just beginning to catch the first light. "When did the chest pressure start?" "About 5 months ago." Her voice was smaller than he had ever heard it. "I kept telling myself it was nothing." "The Emory readings suggest your cardiovascular system has been under sustained stress. Not all of it physical." He kept his eyes on the chart. "Are you sleeping?" She made a sound that wasn't quite a laugh. "No." He asked the standard questions. She answered everything fully. She mentioned the physician in Buckhead managing her prescriptions and named the clinic. He recognized it. Financial ties to a network connected to Darius Reed's family. He made the note without changing his expression. Her medication history would need review by someone without a conflict of interest. He kept going. She had been looking at the window throughout. Then her gaze drifted to the opposite wall and stopped. A framed photograph above the blood pressure station. Kendrick in a white coat, ribbon across an entrance. Beside him, in a lavender dress, with her Sunday hat at its familiar angle. Cora, smiling the way she smiled when she was completely, genuinely happy. The Cora Heart Center. Grand opening, Cascade Heights, Atlanta. Evelyn stared at the photograph. She recognized Cora. She recognized the neighborhood. She recognized the name on the building and understood in one long, still moment exactly what it represented and what she had spent years dismissing. Her hands tightened on her purse. What happens to Evelyn in front of that photograph is the psychological turning point of this entire story. And it happens without a single word spoken.
Social psychologists call it cognitive dissonance collapse. The moment when the story a person has maintained about themselves becomes so contradicted by visible evidence that it can no longer hold its shape. For years, Evelyn had maintained one story. Kendrick Cross was insufficient. That story had protected her, justified her choices, let her sleep. Then she walked into his clinic and found his grandmother's name on a building he had constructed, in the neighborhood they had both grown up in, for the community she had long since stopped thinking about. The story collapsed. When the story you've built your justifications on finally fails, if a person has any genuine depth, what replaces it is not a counter-argument. It is shame. And then, if the person is brave enough, something on the other side of shame. After a long silence, Evelyn looked at him directly. Her eyes were full. "Son," she said, the first time in 6 years she had said it and meant it. "I was wrong. For a very long time, I was wrong about you. I told Melody things. I shaped how she saw you. And I introduced her to Darius because I believed he was—" She stopped, steadied. "I was measuring the wrong things." She looked at her hands. "Please help me. I know I have no right to ask." Kendrick set the tablet down. He looked at her the way he looked at every patient, as a complete human being, with a history and a capacity, however dormant, for change. "You'll need close monitoring," he said. "Your heart isn't just under physical stress." A pause. "It's been carrying unresolved things for a very long time." She nodded once. Her chin trembled. She didn't look away. He picked up his prescription pad and began to write. Why does Kendrick treat her? Not sentimentality, integrity. The oath he had taken did not carry an asterisk, unless the patient treated you badly. And beyond the professional commitment, Kendrick understood something most people arrive at too late. The way you treat someone who wronged you, at the moment you have the power to turn away, is the most honest measure of who you actually are. He could have referred her elsewhere. He chose not to. That choice, unremarked upon, witnessed only by Sylvia through the front desk glass, was the truest expression of everything his grandmother had ever tried to teach him. Patient hands make a perfect dish. Evelyn is sitting in that exam room with a prescription in her hand and tears she hasn't let fall. She kept coming back, and what she brought to one of those follow-up appointments, something she had kept sealed for 6 years, something she had been too afraid to open, is the part of this story that will hit you the hardest. Don't go anywhere. Evelyn came back. Not just because her condition required it. She arrived early every time. 15 minutes before her slot, already in the waiting room, hands folded, watching the door with the particular face of a person who is trying, earnestly and without guarantee, to become worthy of something they previously threw away. Her readings improved steadily, inflammation markers down, rhythm stabilizing, sleep returning in longer stretches. She did exactly what he asked, without negotiation or complaint. He noted it in her charts, not as a personal observation, but as a clinical fact. She also began to talk more,
Not about her health. She talked about her late husband, Gerald, who had died 11 years ago and whom she admitted she had managed with the same high standards and emotional distance she had applied to Kendrick. "I don't know when I decided money and worth were the same thing," she said once, looking at the window. "I think I just assumed it was always true." She talked about Melody, how her daughter had come back to the Cascade Heights house and sat at the kitchen table like a woman who'd missed the last flight out and wasn't sure where she was going. Evelyn never once asked Kendrick to reconsider the marriage, never suggested reconciliation. He noticed that, and he gave it the weight it deserved. The night after her first appointment, Evelyn drove home to the house in Cascade Heights by herself. She sat in the car in the driveway for several minutes without getting out. The magnolia tree in the front yard was dropping petals in the September evening, slow, one at a time, like it had all the patience in the world. She went inside, made tea she didn't drink, then went to the bedroom closet, the one she hadn't fully sorted since Gerald died, and pulled down the old photo albums from the shelf. She needed something to do with her hands. She found the wedding album near the back, turned the pages. Melody in ivory. The church on West Peachtree Street full of morning light. Cora in the front row in her lavender dress, pressing a handkerchief to the corner of her eye. And there, tucked between two pages near the back, not hidden, just held, was a cream-colored envelope, still sealed. Cora's handwriting on the front. For Evelyn. She held it for a long time, long enough for the tea to go cold. She thought about the man she'd seen that morning in the white coat, walking toward her in the waiting room without hurrying. The name on the building, the Cora Hart Center, in the neighborhood where they had both grown up. The photograph on the wall of room 2. She had spent 6 years certain she already knew who Kendrick Cross was. And that morning, she had walked into his clinic and found in 20 minutes that she had not known him at all. She opened the envelope. On a Thursday in early September, Evelyn arrived for her appointment carrying a small white box from H&H Bakery on Gordon Road, the kind of bakery where everything is still made the old way, without shortcuts. She set it on the corner of his desk without ceremony. "I brought those because I couldn't think of what else to bring." "Thank you, Evelyn." He had started using her first name 3 weeks prior. Neither of them had remarked on it. "There's something else." She reached into her bag and brought out a cream-colored envelope, paper gone soft at the edges. Opened now. Cora's handwriting on the front. "Cora pressed this into my hand the week before your wedding," she said. "We were alone in the church hall on West Peachtree Street. She said to read it when I needed to." A pause. "I kept it. Every year I told myself I'd open it when I was ready. Last week I finally did." Kendrick removed the single page and unfolded it. Cora's handwriting. The pen pressed into the paper with the same purpose she brought to everything she made. One sentence. "Please treat my grandson kindly. He may not be rich in the way you understand wealth, but he is rich in a way money can never buy." He read it twice, set it on the desk. He was not going to cry in his own office. He knew that much about himself. But he sat with it a long moment. This one sentence, written and sealed and pressed into a woman's hand 6 years ago, as if Cora had understood something about how the story might go and had quietly left a lamp on in the window just in case. He looked at Evelyn. For the first time in her presence, in all the years of Sunday dinners and church greetings and the long wait of the Buckhead restaurant, he smiled. The real one. The kind Cora used to say you could recognize from halfway across a room. "She always knew how to say the most in the fewest words," he said. Evelyn's face broke at the edges. She pressed the back of her hand to her mouth. Then she straightened,
the way women of a certain generation do when they are moved and refuse to let it take them somewhere they can't come back from. "She really did," she said softly. Consider what Cora actually did when she wrote that letter. She didn't confront Evelyn, didn't argue or demand. She planted something, sealed it, and trusted that if the person who needed it had any genuine depth, life would bring her to the moment where she was ready to receive it. Psychologists call this long arc wisdom, understanding that some truths cannot be forced before a person is ready. Forced too early, they create resistance. Offered at the right moment, they land like recognition, not instruction. Cora understood that Evelyn would only be able to read that letter when she was finally capable of seeing what it said. And she had been patient enough to wait. That evening, Kendrick went home to the house on Cascade Road. He went into the bedroom and opened the closet. In the back, hanging where it had been for 6 years, was a tie. Navy blue, subtle paisley, nothing remarkable. Melody had given it to him in their first year of marriage. He took it off the hanger. Then, on instinct, he reached into the pocket of the dark blazer beside it, the one he'd worn on their first date, years before any of this. A small piece of paper, folded into quarters. Melody's handwriting, red felt-tip pen. "You're too quiet, but I still love you. Don't ever change." He stood in the quiet bedroom with the note in one hand and the tie in the other. He thought about the woman who had written that note, and the distance between who she was then and what had followed. How people traveled that far from themselves, not all at once, but through small surrenders and the slow pull of someone else's version of what their life should look like. He didn't feel bitterness toward the woman who had written it. He felt something more like sorrow, the clean kind. Nearly finished. He folded the note once, set it on the dresser, then dropped the tie in the bin by the door. He stood in the quiet and felt something he had been waiting a long time to feel. Not happiness exactly, not yet, but something lighter, something with room in it. Done. Cleanly, completely, finally done. Kendrick let go of the tie. He let go of the marriage. But there was still one thing nobody knew. Something Evelyn had done quietly, anonymously, months before she ever sat in his waiting room. Something that proves her remorse began long before she had any reason to believe it would be seen. And when Kendrick finds out, it changes everything about how this story ends. A week after the pastry box and the letter, Kendrick's bookkeeper came to his office with a manila folder and the careful expression of someone who isn't sure how to frame what they're about to say. "Dr. Cross, I've been going over the Cora Heart Center's donor records. There's a contribution I flagged for review." She set the folder on his desk, a single printed page, a donor record dated April, 7 months prior. 3 months before Evelyn had ever walked through the clinic door. An anonymous contribution, routed through a properly registered charitable trust, designated specifically for the pediatric cardiac screening program in Cascade Heights. No name, no note. $40,000. Kendrick looked at the page for a long moment. "Can you confirm the routing date?" The bookkeeper checked. "April 14th. Thank you." After she left, he sat with it. April 14th. 7 months before her first appointment. 4 months before she had canceled her first referral. 3 months before her Emory physician told her the readings were progressing and she was out of time. She had done this when she had no reason to believe he would ever know. When there was no opportunity for repair in sight, no audience to perform remorse for. In the same month the divorce paperwork was finalizing, when his name appeared primarily in legal documents. She had routed $40,000 anonymously to a program bearing Cora's name. Before hope was possible. Before anyone was watching. This is the most important distinction this entire story has been building toward.
the difference between performative regret and genuine remorse. Performative regret waits for an audience. It surfaces when there is something to gain. Genuine remorse moves before there is an audience, when nothing is to be gained, because the weight of living with what it did has become heavier than pride. Evelyn donated $40,000 to a program bearing Cora's name 3 months before she had any reason to believe Kendrick would ever know. That is not a woman performing regret. That is a woman who opened a sealed letter and finally understood what she had spent years refusing to see. The destination of genuine remorse is not forgiveness from the person you wronged. It is the restoration of your own integrity, choosing, even when no one is watching, to be the person you should have been all along. He picked up the phone and called her. "I saw the contribution to the Cora Heart Center," he said. A pause. The particular quality of silence when a person realizes something done privately has been seen. "I didn't do it for credit," she said. "I want to be clear about that." "I know. I did it because Cora built something good in you. I spent years not seeing it. I thought maybe I could help carry what she built forward, even a little." He looked out the window at Peachtree Road. A child on the sidewalk was explaining something about a passing bus to the grandmother beside her, with the full urgency of someone delivering genuinely important information. The grandmother was nodding with the patience of someone who has heard this exact observation many times and intends to be delighted by it every single time. "The children in Cascade Heights will carry it forward," Kendrick said. A pause. "That's enough," he said. "That's more than enough." On a Friday morning in late October, Kendrick's last patient finished at 11. He signed the final chart, thanked Sylvia, and walked out onto Peachtree Road. Jade Hale was there, leaning against the low wall near the entrance, coat draped over one arm, watching something across the street with the easy patience of a person who has genuinely stopped rushing. She was a plastic surgeon at Northside Hospital on Johnson Ferry Road. They had met 3 months ago at a medical conference at the Westin in Buckhead. She had made a quietly funny observation about the speaker's use of statistical correlation. He had turned to look at her, and she had not been the least bit startled by the directness of his gaze. She had learned early that Kendrick Cross did not need to be asked how he was doing. He would tell you when he was ready, and not a moment before. She heard the door and turned. "Good morning," she said. "It is," he agreed. They stood together in the October light, buses moving along Peachtree Road, the trees going rust and amber and gold, Atlanta in its warm, indifferent, magnificent motion. She reached over and took his hand. "You did well," she said. "Not you survived it. Well." The word people use when they mean something specific about the manner in which a thing was done. "How do you figure?" "You handled all of it without becoming someone smaller." He thought about the kitchen table on Cascade Road, the recording, the dinner at Aria, room 2, the letter, the tie in the bin by the door. "I had help," he said. She smiled. The good ones always know that. He did not formally forgive Evelyn in the way forgiveness happens in stories. Not at an altar, not with a declaration that tied everything into a clean bow. That is not how the real thing works. What happened was quieter, more durable. He continued treating her. She continued coming. One afternoon she brought her granddaughter, Melody's niece, a 7-year-old named Rosie in pink sneakers, who immediately identified the blood pressure cuff as the arm squeezer and demanded to know if her stuffed rabbit could try it. Kendrick knelt down and explained, very seriously, that the arm squeezer was designed for people rather than rabbits, and that while he understood why a rabbit might be interested, the results would not be medically reliable. Rosie accepted this with great gravity. Evelyn, watching from across the room, had an expression he had not seen there before. Something released. Something that looked very much like peace, arriving at a place that had been locked for a long time. This story teaches us that a person's worth is never found in how loudly others declare it. or how carelessly they dismiss it. It lives in the quiet work you do when no one is watching. In the files reviewed at 5:30 in the morning, the communities built in the neighborhoods that shaped you, and the patience that holds its ground, not because it has stopped feeling, but because it trusts that the truth will eventually find its way to the surface. Patience is not weakness. It is not passivity. It is the strategy of people who understand something the impatient ones do not. The truth always arrives.
And the patient person is always ready when it does. If you've ever been the person in the room that someone completely underestimated, comment below and leave me one word for what that felt like. I'll be reading every single one. These powerful stories were written by real people with deep emotions and life experience, with AI serving only as a supportive tool to help polish the language and deliver valuable lessons of justice, kindness, and resilience to millions of viewers. Production team, story, and screenplay by Quinn Fung. Character development and visual conceptualization by Chris Wynn. Video scripting and scene adaptation by David Wynn. A passionate team dedicated to bringing this story to life.